My name is Jordan Farmer. This is part 2 of episode 28 of the Uncommon Conversations podcast. Today my guest is Alex Conn, and we were just talking about how legal, regulated dispensaries are actually much safer than they get. You avoid a lot of dangers of poor product by having a legal, regulated market. Alex, what's up, my brother?
Yeah. So we were just talking about regulated weed and how basically the whole discussion of legal weed has been perverted. Like I said, like it's really unfair. I just think it's really unfair to use weed anecdotes from non-legal weed discussions. Like you can't compare. I can't make this point clear. You cannot compare weed that you got from the street to weed that's being sold in the dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
It's as bad as comparing like a really good like New York pizza restaurant to like fucking Pizza Hut.
Yeah. Or even worse than that. It's like food poisoning in the third world versus a Paris restaurant.
Exactly. Yeah, that's probably a better comparison. But it's like food poisoning versus a Paris restaurant. And maybe the Paris restaurant is serving the same food. But you can't say, "Oh, I don't want to have that food because I got food poisoning in the third world."
And I want to say it's sort of the difference is the knowns and the unknowns of this situation. With the legal weed, you have the actual farms that are licensed and regulated and like monitored. Then they take it to the packaging, manufacturing, and glass and all the plastics and all that kind of stuff. Various processing to create concentrates. All of them are licensed. All of them are monitored and regulated. And then they're all distributed and sent to these dispensaries that have their own testing and stuff to make sure it's top-notch quality. And so you have that versus the illegal weed market. You don't know the dude who's selling it to you. You don't know where he got it. You don't know where it came from. And you don't know where it was grown. All of that is a mystery. And that's the difference in like the uncertainty and the risk factor relative to an illegal versus a black market.
Yeah. My cousin once, especially I think the people who I think are most danger of like bad weed are suburban kids. My cousin,
the ones that'll buy $80 worth of oregano. Those are the kids in danger.
Yeah, my cousin once said, never buy weed in suburbia, because he said because I remember the first time I ever smoked pot, I was 16, and I was actually going to see Bill Maher, and that was like my first ever time I ever got high. And he said, never buy weed from suburbia, because the weed from suburbia, because the kids in suburbia, they don't know how to fight back. They're not going to beat your ass if you sell them bad shit. They're just going to keep coming for more.
I want to make a quick side note, and then you'll keep your point. We just got a question from one of the people just saying, because of our arguments, would I support legalizing all drugs? And yes, I would. I think it needs to be regulated and kept safe and above board, but fundamentally, the same principles sort of apply to all these drugs, and addiction is the primary issue undergirding them all.
Yeah, right, I agree. I agree to some points, but I don't know if I would make that argument as a policy position.
No one wants to hear that argument.
No one wants to hear that argument.
Everyone has a snowflake reaction to that argument.
No, I would.
Left, right, and
the
center.
Two ones that I think are vastly important to legalize are weed and also psychedelics.
Yeah, those are the two that offer the most benefit. The rest are just functional arguments.
Yeah,
no one can say that meth is good for anybody.
Yeah, I used to make this argument that my kind of litmus test, because I'm kind of on the list of on the litmus test of what drugs will I fight for to be legal, and the litmus test is, well, somebody would be like, hey, I smoked weed with my buddies. And you're like, yeah, that sounds like a fun time. Well, if somebody was or if someone's like, oh, I did some E with some friends in Malibu and it was all fun. And you're like, yay, party on, Garth. But if someone's like, oh, yeah, I did meth, you're like, let's get this guy some help.
It
So,
all
like,
depends. It all depends on how it's framed. If it's like we did some meth, yeah, that's that reaction. But if you told some dudes, me and my girlfriend did meth and we banged for 3 days straight, well, then that's a totally different reaction you're gonna get.
I mean,
I've heard
that
stories like
actually
that, so
puts
I
a
just thought
hole
that'd be funny to bring up.
in my point, a hole in my argument, and actually an argument for decriminalization. This is actually semi spoilers for Breaking Bad, but Breaking Bad is actually a really, really interesting expose on the war on drugs. Like people talk about if you think that Breaking Bad, I wouldn't say the show is pro drug, but the show is definitely anti drug war. Like there's a very big part in season 3 where they could where Jesse and Walt could, if they just said if they had their hands clean, they could get Gus in prison, who's actually a murderer. Remember that part in Breaking Bad?
I vaguely remember it. I did not. I
Yeah,
was not an avid fan, but I did catch it.
But Gus, who's actually a murderer and who's threatening them, they could actually get him in prison if they had their hands clean, because they were. If you just decriminalized or legalized those substances, you wouldn't have that problem. You wouldn't have that problem of this kind of gang mentality of drugs, because people want drugs. Like that's just a normal part of being a human being. It's
Yeah.
like people want drugs, and I wouldn't touch meth. I don't think you would touch meth. I might touch a psychedelic. I have no interest in doing cocaine or any of these drugs, because I just think that if you're having drugs sold by a responsible dealer, that's just really important. It's really important, because if you're just buying it from some guy on the street, you don't know what the fuck you're getting.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, and with the psychedelics and things like that, like there's something good to get from it. There's something good to get even just from the experience, even if you
Fucking
realize
Jim
it's not for
Morrison
you.
wrote all the Doors music on it.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've actually psilocybin mushrooms actually helped cure my depression.
oh,
I
that's
had
great.
lifelong depression tied to my ability to remember and judge myself for all of my past mistakes. And when I had less of an egotistical attachment to my past, when that ego death happened, it allowed me to feel free from that weight, from that burden. And it really, like chemically, like I felt it in the back of my brain, lifted something up that was life changing, and literally nothing else has caused it. Now, I have been doing psychological work for literally a decade before that, and for years and years since I first did that, or a year and a half since I first did that. So maybe 2 years. So it's not so the most important thing, and all the documentaries say this, it's these psychedelic substances and counseling combined are hyper powerful. And some people are willing to be honest with themselves and explore enough to say, I can kind of counsel myself. But even me, and even the wisest person out there, isn't as good as a counselor, and really everyone should get counseling. I'm just kind of a pansy and haven't actually done it myself. But I think everyone should. I just am not living up to my own ideals in that arena.
Yeah, and that's very good. And I think psychedelics are going to be the next legal weed.
Absolutely.
I think
For any entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, I think in 20 years we're going to be be at the same stage we are at legal weed with legal psychedelics.
Yeah.
And
I think MDMA is the next one because of its work on PTSD.
Yeah, because it always starts with medical. It starts with medical.
Yeah.
And then it becomes recreational.
Yep. We got to
Uh,
put things through our scientific religious structure of approval before we'll
before we,
like I'm sort of being facetious and an asshole when I say that, but it's kind of true that like if people are told by the medical community, oh, this is good, they trust it. But until
I
that
agree.
point, they're like, it's bullshit nonsense. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree. I agree. And like I said, I'm totally fine. Like as just somebody who has libertarian values. Like if we just get to MDMA, if we don't get heroin legal, if we don't get cocaine legal, we
I
don't
don't think
get
anyone's crying about that.
I don't think anybody. I don't think even like Penn Jillette, who's a libertarian, would cry about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we get to a world where psychedelics and marijuana are legal, I think most people, libertarians, progressive, will be very happy. But yeah, I definitely believe in at least decriminalizing all substances because nobody should go to jail for a substance, spying or selling.
Agreed.
At the
Agreed.
very least, nobody should go to jail.
Side note, how familiar are you with Penn Jillette? Because I think we might have mentioned it in our conversations, but are
No,
you
you
are
sent
you
me.
plugged
You
into
sent
him?
me. I'm like very. I mean, I've listened to him. I've listened to some of his stuff. But yeah, Penn Jillette I like a lot. He's one of the better. He's one of those really good libertarians.
So you sort of found the secular talk, like you found secular talk, like the atheist to progressive sort of track.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
kind of went atheist to libertarian track because of
Yeah.
Penn Jillette. Because
Yeah.
because of two things. It was interesting because I grew up. My grandpa's a pastor. I grew up in a very religious home.
Mm-hmm.
Penn Jillette existing was mind blowing to me because he was a genuine, compassionate, thoughtful, good person who
Mm-hmm.
was not religious in orientation. And to me, like, and for most religious people, that seems like an alien concept, mostly because I think you risk, because most people who are atheists aren't nihilists, meaning they don't believe there's no meaning in the world. They just don't think it's what the religions necessarily say
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I agree.
and so the fear of nihilism, which many atheists fall into, is if you don't think there's an ultimate meaning or right and wrong or any of it, you're gonna act freely and without concern. And so some of what you do will be good and some of what you do will be bad. And you're
Yeah.
just ignorant to it. It's not that it's not happening. And that's the truth of all human existence. We just gain
Yeah.
awareness of what we're doing, but we aren't we don't have omnipotent, or omniscient understanding of our actions at any given time. It's always sort of a mixture of wisdom and best practices and experience and trial and error and just predictability. If you think about if I do
Yeah.
this, 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 and this, what's going to happen? This
Yeah.
seems like the best slot. Boom, do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a similar experience, like with I think a lot of kids like that become atheists have the same experience that you're talking about, which is kind of learning about what an atheist is. Like I remember, and this kind of comes back to my opening thing, which is when I was 12, I grew up in the Catholic Church. Not really grew up in the Catholic Church,
I'm
but
sorry.
okay.
I'm kidding.
It was a weird. I had a weird upbringing because my so I was baptized Episcopalian because that's what my dad was Episcopalian. That was just where his beliefs are. But my dad was not a very religious person. He believes in
Well,
God.
can you, if you know, will you tell me what distinguishes an Episcopalian from other sort of broader Protestant
Episcopalians are
Christians?
relatively they're more liberal on social issues than I find other Protestants to be. Like I think they're like a lot of them. Like Tucker Carlson is actually an Episcopalian,
No, okay.
but he says like I hate like the administration of the Episcopalians because they're too socially liberal.
Hmm.
But but then my mom when I was in third grade had breast cancer, and
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, and my mom had breast cancer, and she said like having faith really helped her kind of get through that. So my mom, like after she was like she was, I don't want to say cured, because when you like get out of cancer, it doesn't necessarily mean you're cured. You have to like get medicine for like the next 10 years. But
So you're in remission or whatever, right?
she was
That's
in
the term.
remission, and she was basically like, you were basically out. So she had to take medicine, but she didn't have to like go through chemo anymore. But she made this kind of thing where she was like, I'm going to do as much as I can to go back to the to Catholicism, where I was raised, where she was raised, and she wanted to go back and just kind of, she was really just committed. She had like a very faith driven plan. But my mom is
It was more so instinct than it was
it was
like an
more instinct,
articulated
and it was
plan.
more like I said, it was more because when she went through that experience, she found faith important to her, and stuff like that. And I didn't have my first Holy Communion until I was, which is something that most Catholics have when they're in like fourth grade. Um, so I didn't have it until I was until I was 12, and I read about two things. I heard about the Catholic Church sex scandal, and that's something that a lot of young people kind of read about, and you're like, because you're kind of like, when you're a young person and you kind of look at the priest as like someone who's infallible, and you look at these people who are supposed to be, they're named as father, and these people are supposed to be infallible, and yet men of God, and yet they're having little boys suck their dicks. And I was like, this is just like, this is wrong. And then I learned, like, and also I was listening to like Green Day music, and they would do songs about organized religion and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't want to be a part of this. And my mom said, just do your Holy Communion, and then you can get to stop, and then you can be agnostic or what the fuck. And I did. And then when I was around 14, I was like, from then on, I just didn't think about religion. I didn't think about what I believed. I just knew I didn't want to be a part of that Catholic shit. Like, I didn't really think about it. Like my religion was not something. And then when I was around 14, I was like, I just started having like visions of like being judged by God and being judged by the Holy Spirit. And I was like, what the fuck? And I started thinking about, I think a lot of kids, like when they're around 14, 15, like are like, what happens after we die? And I started learning about, I was like, am I going to be in heaven? Like, what is heaven, and how do I get to heaven? And then I was just kind of doubting the existence of God as well. And it was to the point where I remember I did this prayer to accept Jesus into my heart. And I was like, I'm going to go back to church with my mom again. That's what I thought. And then I stumbled on there's a great channel called The Atheist Voice, which is Hemet Mehta's channel, and he has a new channel called The Friendly Atheist. But I was reading, I started listening to him saying, and then his whole thing was and then I started listening to him, and he basically said, well, there's just eternal nothingness after we die. And that scared the fuck out of me at first. That scared the fuck out of me at first. But I started warming up to the idea, and it made like kind of the fear of God go away. And that kind of fear, and there's a kind of anxiety about God, like, and not necessarily just like people are like, oh yeah, fear of God will help you not murder people, but it's more than that. Like, a fear of God can make you not, like, can worry you about like masturbation, or like just,
It's being before the judgmental father
yeah,
is
exactly.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's exactly. And I just had this kind of relief off my back, and I was like, and that kind of became my belief system. And I just and I was in a really deep depression at the time, and I think weirdly, which a lot of people that like that talk about religion and religion helping them out of depression, weirdly atheism helped me out of my depression. And like, and that's like, I think one of the rarest stories, because I was like, I started listening to secular talk, and I was like, these atheist people are really smart, and they're saying subversive things. And at the time, like I remember the big thing I was doing, like I because I was so anti-religion when I was 13, before I like had the crisis of faith, I was really anti-religion as well. Like I was really into gay rights at the time, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I started just kind of when I was 14. I just started being like, I'm an atheist, and in fact, I the only time I've been to church since I was 12 was for my brother's confirmation. My brother is like the typical Catholic kid. Like he's very like he's just very Catholic, and he's much more into, like, he's very much the more typical student kid. Like he actually has a MAGA hat and shit like that.
Hmm.
So like it's so funny. We like I think we should do a picture with him in my MAGA hat and me with my Bernie t-shirt. Which but yeah, and at that same time, I was discovering Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders and made sense to me in a way. I remember having Bernie Sanders volunteers come up to my doorstep and talking to them, and that was kind of the beginning of my my religious my anti-religious thinking, and kind of founding what I believed about the universe, and also what my political beliefs are. So they kind of happened at one time, and that's
That's
basically my story.
cool. That's usually how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I wanna explore a few things with you here. One, I mean, you're sort of doing this in public, so I guess I'm not really giving you a fair. If I ask you about your brother, that's not really fair. Outside
No,
of
I
your
mean,
brother or people that you know, are there people who say they have a connection to God or say that they've sort of felt God or whatever that you
no.
consider to be like that you
Most of my
consider to be both genuine and thoughtful and
no
honest?
most
And are there
most of my
people that fit that bill in your? I was going to ask about your brother, but are there people in your life in general that fit that bill for you?
no my most of my friends are Christians. Um, I actually, like, I've been waiting. I have very few atheist friends. There's some people I know in college that are cool that are atheists, I think, but most of my friends are Christians. And my friend, who's very much like kind of my partner in many ways, um, and he's been a friend of mine for a few years, and he's like a very kind
Partner
of,
in terms of relationship or
no,
business or
no,
what do
no.
you?
He's my friend. He's a
Just,
really good friend. We've worked
he's
on
just your
stuff.
buddy. Okay.
He's my buddy, and he's a really good guy, and he's he's a very big Catholic. I still remember there was a girl that I was really into, and she was like, "Oh, I remember when I was doing my confirmation, and I told my parents I was an atheist," and I was like, "We have the exact same story." Like, and I was like, and that was when I had my male feminist phase. Um, but um, but yeah,
And to
I
be fair,
mean,
there's nothing wrong with like the good and basically the
no,
tenets of feminism. Like you
no,
can
I
be a
think that
male
those
feminist, but
tenets are
yeah,
feminist.
you
Yeah,
admitted up
but
front it was for you. It was about pussy.
it was exactly about pussy. But yeah, um, but yeah, I mean that's what happened in general. And my brother, my brother is, my brother is probably fine with me talking about this. So both me and my brother is very much like the more athletic, the more like I suffer from a lot of learning disability. I suffer from NVLD, which is on the spectrum. I suffer from ADHD.
So
My
you're more of an
brother,
outsider
I'm very much of an outsider. I mean, he's
or
actually
like
more of
anomaly.
like the outside. But I like being indoors. I'm very much, I like watching
I meant
TV.
socially. Like
No, socially.
socially,
Like
you're
I have
more of
very few
a,
friends.
like there's normal, and then there's on the
Yeah,
outskirts, and a
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
rare individual in some
yeah.
sense. So you're more on
So
that side.
my brother is very much like my brother until recently had like a girlfriend, and he just like he's very like he was very outgoing. He has many friends, and
He's
I'm
plugged
one of those
in.
people that, yeah, he has many friends, and again he's somebody who like he's going to be one of those people I think when he grows up who's going to be Catholic and he's going to go to church. Like I think every and Catholics in general don't go to church that much. Like that's just a thing that's the difference I think between Catholicism
The
um
rest.
and like a lot of Protestantism is Catholics go to church like 10
Easter and
times a
Christmas.
year. No, a little bit more than that, but like they go to church like probably 10 times a year.
Hmm.
Like well, like we don't go to church. Like at one point I went to church every Sunday. There was a point when I was like 10, 11 where I remember every Sunday we went to church. And I remember like I still remember when I was a kid, like I remember this is the weirdest thing about church that like was my first like ew religion was I used to really despise the smell of church.
Hmm.
I hated the smell of church. And I remember when I was talking to my mom and she was like, yeah, like this is the reason I left the church. And she was like, no, you always hated church. You just didn't like the smell. And I was like, fuck you, mom. But yeah, that's just my long-winded story.
No worries. It's interesting. So you started questioning these things a little younger than I did, and you started thinking about politics and younger than I did. I didn't get to that until it was time to vote, and so it was kind of like up to me to figure out how I was going to vote, and that's kind of what spurred me to. It
How
was
old are
when I was
you?
17, right before I turned 18, but that's what
How
kind of
old are
got
you?
me plugged in. I'm 27 now.
Oh, you're 27 now.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
about 10 years ago. Um, and um, anywho, so on the atheistic sort of questioning front, what made me ultimately what the linchpin was, or what the moment was where I lost my faith, um, when I was like 17, about to turn 18. It was because I had this like mental prison that I would not think outside of and not consider the world outside of, that had, with weed and a few other sort of not religious things but sort of practical things, had not it didn't work out. It didn't make sense. That particular worldview didn't add
Yeah.
up. And so when I started questioning it, I broke out of that psychological prison, and I was sort of determined to never get back into one. And so I
Yeah.
think that helped me avoid any political attachments that are too too like that angers me down too much. I've been able to
Yeah.
avoid sort of falling into another
Yeah.
belief system. But anyways, so when that happened, first off, my entire childhood, I felt like, and I think when you're an hyper intellectual and hyper open person, your mind works as a very effective disruptor of your more primal, calmer
Yeah.
modes of being and instincts. Like there's a lot more disruption and
Yeah.
interference. And
Yeah.
so I always felt like other people, this is sort of what I asked you about your brother and people
Yeah.
that have good intent and genuinely feel like they've connected to God. I always felt like everyone else could connect to something at church emotionally or in their bodies and their souls that I could not. They were tapping into something that I just was I could intellectually analyze the sermons and the lessons and try to understand it, but I
Yeah.
felt very disconnected from that stuff. And when I lost my faith, I knew I lost something of significant meaning when that happened. And so when I moved away from the church, I went back to church once, realized I felt like not an outsider in the sense that I wasn't, because it was a church I'd been going to for years. I felt like I was something different now, and it would be inauthentic to call myself what these people were. And so I said I was on the other side of the coin, and so I left it. But I knew I left things of value when that happened, that I lost things lost a belief system, lost a worldview, lost a community, lost a connection to meaning in many ways. And so I made a choice when that happened that I would keep my heart and my mind open to believing in God if it could make sense to me and if I could find the right sort of position to have faith off of. Because, like, yes, you can have, say you want to have faith. Well, faith in what? Faith
Yeah.
in which religion? Yes, you have faith, but faith in what? You have to have some context or way to guide yourself into truth that is not just based on faith. But because we're dealing with things that no one can really know, faith has a natural position in that where you have to say, like I don't know. It's sort of like you go to the edge of the digital map and it's empty space, and as soon as you take that next step, it turns to color and the rest of the stuff illuminates. You got to sort of say, well, I've gotten to this edge of this place, and the faith is taking that step before you see it, and then you feel it, see it, and it actualizes. Anyways, I got off track slightly there. So I started studying religious people and religious thinkers and the nature of God and the universe and everything. And it didn't really all start to add up until I started listening to Jordan Peterson. And I went and I looked at his lectures and his book, Maps of Meaning, which is very, very hard to understand. I would recommend the lectures. I would not recommend anyone go try to read the book. But essentially, it's articulating the neurological and biological underpinnings of belief systems and how it works in the human mind. That was the goal. Maps of Meaning, the Architecture of Belief. That's the name of the book in the lecture series. And that plus his lecture series, this is what I want you to go check out the Maps of Meaning lectures, and I want you to go check this out. The Psychological Significance of the Biblical Stories. It's a lecture series Jordan Peterson did on the Bible, on Genesis specifically. And what he does is he basically uses literary interpretation and myths and metaphors and the structure and the history of those things to give you a place for divine truth to have relevance within a scientific context. And that literally links those two worlds together. And that was like he's the most important intellectual in Western civilization, in my opinion. And there is no close second. There's no one that even touches what Jordan Peterson's done in terms of his work, his political influence, his political acumen, what he's advocating for. I personally, if I was talking to him face to face, I'd say, Jordan Peterson, you've been a fucking coward up until this point. You need to run for office. You don't need to spend 6 fucking months studying energy infrastructure in order to decide that you're better than that asshole Trudeau in office. Go get you some and stop being a little bitch. That would be my statement to Jordan Peterson, because he's so brilliant, and yet he's incapable of acknowledging simple truths like who else is going to run in Canada and have a fucking chance at saving that country? I literally went and watched the leaders debate between all the different parties that are trying to take Trudeau's position, and they're all tools or stupid or weird. Like the Quebec guy is just kind of weird to me, and they're trying to break away from Canada. It's really dumb. It's really dumb. They don't understand. I mean, anyways, I'm sort of ranting. Anyways, but those lectures brought me to a point now where I believe God exists. And not only do I believe God exists, but I believe that, well, it's a really, really long explanation. Would you like my, foundational from the ground up worldview, or would you rather go explore these things yourself, and then we'll talk about that in another day?
And we can talk about that another day. But I think that it's with faith in general. Would you say you're like a Christian in any way, or you think you're just like a
So the degree to which the sacred texts actually speak to divine truth about the nature of human beings, I consider it to be accurate. And so because the Bible is the only religious text that starts off and has a definitive, we are made in the image of God, there is divinity within each being, rooting divine value within the individual. Because that's the only religion that I know of that really does that so concretely, I sort of consider it to be a tier above the rest in terms of resonating with divine truth.
Yeah.
But um, the Muslims believe that Jesus was just one prophet amongst many, and that the Bible is one of many different sacred texts to study, and the Quran is sort of the culmination. It came after the Bible. They
Yeah.
believe the Bible is the culmination of things. The Mormons think that the Book of Mormon is the part 3 culmination of the Old Testament, New Testament, and now
The Return of the Jedi,
Mormonism.
according to the Return of the Jedi, according to the Book of Mormon musical.
Yeah. I've seen the. Wait. Say that again.
So it is funny. So like whenever I think of it's like the part 3, like there's a big part of the Book of Mormon musical where like they say it's like the end of the trilogy. So like they call it the Return of the Jedi of the religion.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
And it is, and if you know much about the LDS church, they're actually, so they're basically the reason why there is an LDS church instead of just a Christian church, and why they differentiate themselves is they believe that when the church, when the Council of Nicaea and the Vatican Roman Catholic Church and all that in the um, last millennia, that through all those centuries and all of the different philosophies, that the actual hand anointed authority of Jesus Christ that he passed on to his disciples, that had some sort of direct lineage, that it was lost somewhere in that time, and a renewed authority of Jesus Christ had to be brought about on this planet, uh, in order to essentially to bring Christ back. And so it is sort of like a part 3 Return of the Jedi type of thing. It's interesting. But anyways, I just wanted to say,
Yeah.
um,
So I wanted to say in terms of like intellectuals that like a couple things that respond to me, like intellectuals that like I mean I probably should listen to more Jordan Peterson, but weirdly like the atheist like the like I think it was like the Four Horsemen that really got to me even with his dumb support of the Iraq War was Hitchens.
I love
Hitchens.
Hitchens. It's interesting. I love Hitchens. I find Sam Harris to be a complete waste of space.
No, I agree with you.
I've
It's like
literally never listened to Sam Harris and felt like I got anything from listening to him in my life. And that's
I
pretty
agree.
sad. He's such a smart guy. He's a neuroscientist. And I feel like anyways, continue your point, but
Yeah,
I just wanted to make
Hitchens
that
is
point.
like Hitchens by far. Hitchens and Dawkins, I think, are the smarter ones. Dennett, I haven't really explored that much, but Harris, like, I legitimately think like I think that you should. I think there is somewhat of a form of Islamophobia in him, where like he keeps picking on Islam and stuff like that. And
I,
they're like,
well,
yeah,
I think we just don't understand. We don't understand like how Christian religion went through many phases and went through a transition from
yeah,
violent militaristic Christianity to, and to be fair, that was more so like empires building with Christianity, more
yeah,
so than
yeah,
Christianity building an empire. But um,
yeah.
the fact
But
of the matter is, like the worldviews of many in the Muslim world in many of these countries are disgustingly different from the United States. Like not in detailed ways. Like they think homosexuals should be stoned to death. They think women who cheat should be stoned to death. They think that like theocratic law should be implemented. These worldviews are actually represented in higher amounts based off of poll data in these communities than and so it's about those worldviews. It's not about Islam. It's about, do you think
those world
theocracy is
wars,
bad?
yeah,
Do you think that women should be considered equal
yeah,
citizens
trust me, yeah,
in society? And
yeah,
there is and so this is just my, I'm in the middle of studying Islam, so I can't speak to this
yeah.
fully.
You can't
But
trust.
everything I've seen up until this point would tell me that there is not a egalitarian philosophy that can be extracted out of Islam.
I
There
agree.
is, from the beginning, men and women are fundamentally different. To serve Allah as a man or a woman is going to be different. Ergo, the
The
laws surrounding men
seven
and women should
virgins
be
and stuff
different.
like that.
And
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that seems to be like Western values are not coming from that religion. Like that, like they seem to
yeah.
be
I agree.
conflicting worldviews, not complementary ones.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I will say that with the LDS Church, that Mormonism is the only school of religion that I genuinely think can be completely disproven. Where it happened recently enough
because
where
of Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith, just think like the reasons for believing in the LDS is the same reason, is very similar to is like as dumb as the reasons for the Iraq War. Like the whole thing is Joseph Smith literally said, "Oh, I have some golden plates." The people then said, "Can I read those golden plates?" "No, God said I can't share them with you." And then he goes. There's that great South Park segment where he's like, where they're explaining and by the way, I think South Park is the best form of political commentary in so many ways. But
it's probably the best like American literature on critiquing politics that there is. Like,
yeah, I agree.
but in the 21st century.
In the 21st century, but Mormonism is like, and then apparently he wrote like another book that he tried to do, and it got like the Book of Abraham, and it got burned in a fire. So like the guy, and he was just like a 15-year-old kid, and he had a big imagination, and he lied all the time, and then he made excuses like God won't let me do this. Like it literally, if you study Mormonism, like there's so much problems intellectually with Mormonism that you can't. I don't think you can really defend Mormonism intellectually, and I don't even think many Mormons even intellectually. Like, there's not. I don't see like any like form of Mormons that really go up like to a. If like any form of Mormon apologist went up to like Hitchens, if he was still alive, would get fucking annihilated. There's not it's such a Mormonism is such an obvious fake where I don't even think that there's not any form of backing. Like I remember there was this thing where BYU came with this, and they said, well, like where Joseph Smith said he saw Jesus, like there was golden plates. We are going to bring these golden plates to BYU scientists. I'm like, I don't fucking want golden plates at BYU scientists. I want them at like a secular organization so they can check that shit out. Why the fuck are you bringing it to BYU scientists? People that are already fucking biased. So yeah, anyway, that's just my rant on Mormonism.
It's interesting because my mind immediately went to what about atheists that might have a biased opinion? I was thinking now it's less likely. Obviously, they have less to defend and more to attack, but I don't know. Anyways, my in terms of like, was Joseph Smith.
And also, there's a difference between secular and atheist.
So this is where I'm very blessed to have the grandfather that I did and the religious sort of education I did from my own family. The sins of a man cannot be held against the ultimate truth of God. Mm-hmm. The ultimate truth of God is an entirely different domain than the failings of an individual man. So when it comes to, so it's interesting. So like my observations on the Mormon Church are anthropological in nature. I lived in Utah for 3 years as a agnostic-ish, atheistic type of person who was open about my own questions about whether or not I believed in God and what I thought. And I talked, and you can imagine me. I love talking to people about ideas. So you can imagine me in a situation like this. Everyone that I'm trying to talk to, everyone that I'm trying to like bring ideas out of and analyze and understand. And there are many aspects to the way their religion and the structures of their religion is formed that I think is superior to other religions. One, like they all do voluntary work. There aren't very many paid positions in the church. Only the top guys that travel and for whatever reason, you could make arguments about whether or not they should do this. If you're asking someone to travel across the world, it kind of makes sense. You would pay them to do that. But Everyone on the ground level and at the church, the landscapers and everything, it's all volunteer work. They believe in like health and vitality and wellness and taking care of yourself, and like avoiding drugs and all these things. Like not in the like there is the you shouldn't do that, that's bad side of it. Then there's also what is best for your health, right? You can definitely say like caffeine in high amounts or alcohol and some other things have questionable effects on your health.
Do you know about the Coke controversy with Mormonism?
With the caffeine thing?
Yeah.
How like yeah, they can have it in some forms like energy drinks, but not in
do you know
coffee.
why? Do you know about why?
Um,
Okay, so there was a CEO, there was somebody who worked very high in either Pepsi or Coke who was Mormon. And that's why because originally no caffeine, but now they kind of made the rule different because there was somebody high up in either Pepsi or Coke.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'll check that out. Let me take a second to write that down real quick.
That's something I was told.
Yeah. Anyway, if you're analyzing the Mormon Church for metaphorical divine truth that resonates with the ultimate truth of human beings, I think that. But here's the thing: when you have that framework, many things offer fruitful like opportunities, like analyzing. So I consider like the astrology and the way it sort of comments on human personality and you as an individual. It's like a proto-psychology a little bit, where it's like saying you're going to most likely be struggling with this thing that almost all human beings suffer with at some point in their life. And you'll go and you'll try to grow into this other thing. Your north node is this other thing where you're going to sort of aim for in your life. And that's like a sort of proto-psychology where they're trying to say, this is your nature, this is where you want to be, and this is the in-between. And if you look at it as what can I get out of it, you can definitely get something out of it. If you look at it as how can I dismiss it, you can definitely dismiss it. And they're both true.
No, I agree with that. And I think like,
it's interesting.
I think something can get out of like a lot of religions, and I think that the thing is, I think that there's a lot of things that do you know the author David Foster Wallace?
David Wallace, I've heard of, but I don't know him.
Infinite Jest, which is like a famously long ass fucking book. But he said that Americans have like, not Americans, but just people in general have like a biological need to have faith and be a part of a religion. So like, for instance, even atheists, like they kind of cling to like a political ideology that is kind of a religion and stuff like that.
I have something I want to say real quick on that point, because it's actually technically true that essentially the best way to understand it is this. In order for you to have hang on. The video cut out a second. I'm going to wait for it to come back just so I can make sure that we're Okay, he's gone. He'll come back real quick. Anywho,
yeah, I don't know what the fuck happened. I honestly don't know what the fuck happened.
No, you're good. You're good. It was just a small error. So luckily it's the same live, so there won't be any issues there. So if you're a nihilist and you believe there is no direction or meaning in the world, or any hierarchy of value, is essentially like moral value. If you don't believe there's any hierarchy of moral value, any structure to moral value, then you're sort of lost and you're going everywhere, and you're by definition going to enter into bad territory. But if you are oriented towards any sort of moral structure, by definition, for the way our brains work, we have to place something at the top of the hierarchy to say this is the ultimate moral authority. And you cannot get around that. It's either your own intellect and reason, the collective reason of the scientific community, the collective or the religion that you choose. or the collective belief system of a political ideology. And so you have to say there's some source of ultimate moral authority, and whatever you say that is your God by definition, in any functional
Yeah,
way. Your God
yeah,
is what you orient your moral world around, and everyone has to have some ultimate moral authority. So we don't get around the issue of having a God or having a moral
yeah.
framework. There isn't an out.
Yeah. I think that those are two. I think that a big thing is, and Kyle Kalinske has talked about this a lot, and you can see Kyle Kalinske is like a big intellectual influence on me. Kyle Kalinske, I think, explains this very well, where he says, he said, like, there's very specific. In order to have a society, you're like, you don't kill me, I won't kill you. You won't rob me, I won't rob you. So you understand, you have theory of mind, and theory of mind is like, you have the same feelings as me. Like, you also like have a mind, and you're also conscious like me. So I
Which is not
have,
obvious to many people.
no, I'm just saying that, like, that's just something that I think is a very moral sense of it. I honestly think it is kind of crazy to be like, I'm not going to kill because I think God is going to punish me. I think that that's just kind of wrong. I think that you should not want to murder somebody, because murder is wrong by definition, and it's taking
Well,
away.
you'd have to say, like, why, like, you can't. I mean, I guess it feels self-evident why murder would be bad, but I have urges, like, again, so there's like the reason and the intellectual side, and then there's like the primal nature. I have primal urges to be violent towards people all the time. I'm a huge fan of MMA, partially because it gives me sort of an external
And I
and in
think
my own
people
life an
do have
outlet
that. I think people
for
have
my
that urge.
violent urges. So I don't. So, anyways, my only point is I don't think it's automatic. Like, human nature shows us that it's not automatic through people's ability to reason for themselves that they would be nonviolent. People choose violence for all of these various reasons, or act on violence, act in violence, act on their violent impulses. Um, with that, it's only something else added into the equation that pulls them out of that. Like, why if you so built into your assumptions are we're the same kind of a thing. Well, if you're a different race, different religion, you speak differently, and you act in all sorts of different ways, and some of those might even be morally reprehensible to me, even if I'm mistaken, we're not the same thing in that framework. I can treat you all sorts of ways, and because you're different, I can say it's okay
Yeah.
because we're different, even if you're mistaken.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you know
Yeah.
that we're ultimately the same in some sort of a way, you can then act off of that presupposition, but that presupposition has to come from somewhere. And yeah, and it's a mixture of values, and so I believe like values that are ultimately true will map onto reality. So science shows
Yeah.
us we're all the same beings. Like, there is the Neanderthal infusion amongst Homo sapiens, but for the most part, we're all basically the same thing. And because we can all procreate with each other, we're all a fluid population of the same creature. And so science now can tell us this is the way it is. But again, you have to get that from something. I don't believe it's ever. I don't believe those things are automatic. I think it's easy to assume it because everyone in our world pretty much believes that, and anyone who acts differently we think is bad. But I don't think it's automatic to human beings. I think so I believe like the Christian conception of we have an inherent sinful nature and we must repent from our sins and turn towards the Father, the judgmental Father, the ideal, is metaphysically and metaphorically true for us. Meaning, if you listen to all your, like you talked about, doing stuff for pussy, if you listen to all your base instincts and impulses, like related to slapping a woman's ass, related to grabbing a woman's tits, related to hitting someone in the head, if you just give in to your natural direction as a creature, emerging up out of Mother Nature, metaphysically speaking, that's what we're doing. We have this primal nature we're emerging up out of. if you just give into that, you're going to be an immoral asshole human being. That's kind of the default position of nihilists, is just give in to my wants and desires and pleasures, which can easily turn into evil if you're perverted and or like wired the wrong way. We have to be able to say there's this nature, the way people are, which is neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. And then in order to, so this is where sin and marksmanship and hitting the bullseye and all that stuff, that language comes in. You have to change your direction and aim for the ideal and move progressively towards the ideal. And because in our own families, the comforting, safe zone is the mother, typically, and the maternal instinct, and the judgmental, I'm pulling your potential out of you, and I'm going to say you can do better, so regardless of how you feel about it, I'm telling you how it is. That is a patriarchal, masculine, very much like energy or aspect to us. Like on average, men are going to be more like that than women, but men and women can embody both of these sort of feminine male spirits. So you have to reject your nature, repent from your inherently sinful ways, and reorient yourself towards the ideal way to live as a human being, and then live according to that. And so we are creatures emerging up out of Mother Nature and reaching up towards Father God. And we're stuck in that. And so I believe in the love and acceptance of saying we are these creatures, we have this nature. Don't judge yourself for how you are, because you didn't choose that. But what you turn yourself into and where you orient yourself, that's where you have control. And that's where we can judge you and say, are you oriented towards the good, which you, in your particular case, Alex, are, or are you oriented towards evil or nothing? Some people choose evil, and the reason why people choose evil is because of resentment towards the world. And I will say straight up, I have many reasons to hate the world for what it's done to my family and to people that don't deserve it in my life. And to me, to some degree, but for the most part, my shortcomings have been my own, in my opinion. I'm very much one of those people where what's happened to me has been self-inflicted wounds as much as anything else. But I have all the reasons in the world to be resentful and vengeful and hateful towards the world and to all of humanity for not being good enough. But if I have forgiveness in my heart for the sinful ways of man, and we're all oriented towards the good, you can find a different path, and you can get rid of that resentment and that, because the truth is, if you're just the judge, everyone in the world looks inadequate, fucked up, useless, deceitful, etc., etc. If you're just the mother who sees the good and the potential and the humanity in everyone, then you only see this warm, fuzzy, glowy, no one's ever actually that bad and evil kind of a naive worldview. And one without the other is limited, but both together are best. So if I can say, I love and acknowledge your nature as just being something you didn't choose, and so I'll meet you where you're at and love you as you are. But we both know we can be oriented towards the good and develop ourselves and bring better versions of ourselves out. I expect that of you at the same time. And if you're oriented towards that, and again, I think you are, then we have common ground. Then we can be united in this sort of grander moral sense. But until that point, we cannot. One without the other is flawed.
That's why a lot of people that are like, I don't necessarily think it's like I don't know if it's like masculine and feminine, because I think that that's definitely true, and I think that that's definitely an interesting point. But
I want to make sure I define what I mean by that before we get into it.
No,
when I say
what
is masculine and feminine to me is scientifically what are the behaviors typically associated more so with females, and what are the behaviors typically associated more so with males. Women obviously are in charge of taking care of kids. There's a compassionate, empathetic end to that. Men are warriors, violent makers, aggressive. We have testosterone. There's certain things that sort of just come with that. And so we all can embody those, like toughness. There's a feminine toughness and a masculine toughness, but toughness is the virtue to embody. There's honesty. There's female honesty, male honesty, but honesty is the virtue to embody, and et cetera, et cetera. We're
Yeah,
all
but
humans, but yeah, there is a masculine, feminine.
yeah, but would you like the only thing is like, would you say
Here,
like
keep
a
your thought. Let's hop off. We're at another hour. We'll hop right back on. I'm really enjoying this, man.
I'm
In case
enjoying
you
this
didn't
too.
know.